The scarred heart. The helicopter blades sliced through the night air as Adrian Blackwood dangled from the skid, his scarred hand slipping on the rain-slicked metal. 50 stories below, Manhattan's lights blurred through his fading vision. This wasn't how a man worth $30 billion was supposed to die, alone, desperate, with no one who would truly mourn his passing. As his grip weakened, the horrific burned scars that had made him a recluse for the past decade seemed insignificant compared to the emptiness that had driven him here. "Let go, Mr. Blackwood," the pilot's voice crackled through his earpiece. "You survived that fire for a reason. Someone cut your brake lines tonight, they wanted you dead at that charity gala. But I'm not working for them." The mysterious woman's words pierced through Adrian's suicidal haze. The revelation hit him like a physical blow. Someone wanted him dead, which meant someone believed he still mattered. After years of hiding behind his wealth and the grotesque mask of scar tissue that had once been his face, this attempt on his life was paradoxically the first thing to make him feel alive. If he let go now, he would never discover who wanted him dead, or why. Emma Chen ducked into the service elevator of Blackwood Tower, her heart pounding against her ribs. The memory stick hidden in her bra contained enough evidence to destroy Adrian Blackwood, or save him. As the building's head of security, she had discovered the conspiracy within his company 3 months ago, but tonight's assassination attempt had forced her hand. The same scars that had made the world recoil from him had captivated her from the moment she'd interviewed for the position. While others saw a monster, she had recognized something in his eyes, a profound loneliness that mirrored her own. Now she had just minutes to reach him before the conspirators realized she had survived the explosion that should have silenced her forever. The elevator lurched, stopping between floors. Emma cursed under her breath, prying open the control panel with trembling fingers. 3 months of covert investigation had led to this night, discovering that someone deep within Blackwood Industries was systematically dismantling Adrian's legacy. The same person who had orchestrated the brake failure that should have killed him at the charity gala he'd ultimately decided not to attend. She had only taken the head of security position as a stepping stone, a way to rebuild her career after the scandal at her previous firm. She never expected to find herself fighting to save the life of a man she'd never properly met, yet somehow felt she knew intimately. The lights flickered as Emma rewired the elevator. Her thoughts flashed back to the first time she'd glimpsed Adrian through the security cameras, his tall frame hunched as if carrying an invisible burden, his damaged face hidden from the handful of trusted staff allowed in his private quarters. She had studied his file obsessively. Adrian Blackwood, 38, sole survivor of the fire that claimed his parents and brother. Inherited Blackwood Industries at 28, transformed it into a technology and medical research powerhouse worth over $30 billion. Retreated from public life after the fire destroyed half his body. No romantic attachments. No friends. Only a fortress of wealth and isolation. Adrian's security team rushed him through the private entrance of Blackwood Medical Research, the billion-dollar facility he had built after the accident that claimed his family and his face. "Sir, we've contained the immediate threat, but we still don't know who's behind it," his head of security reported. Adrian barely heard him, his mind replaying the words from the helicopter pilot, a woman whose face he'd never seen. Someone had orchestrated tonight's events, but why now, after all these years of isolation? The only public appearance he'd made in a decade, and assassins had been waiting. He pressed his hand against the biometric scanner, entering the reinforced panic room that doubled as his office. The monitors flickered to life, showing security feeds from across his empire. On screen 4, he froze. Emma Chen, his missing head of security, bleeding from a gash on her forehead, fighting her way through the service corridors of his building. The woman he had hired but never met in person, whose dossier he had memorized, whose calm voice in security briefings had become the only human connection he allowed himself. She was supposed to be protecting the gala he'd avoided. What was she doing here? Adrian's finger hovered over the security alert button. In 10 years, he had perfected the art of trusting no one. Every person who had seen his scarred face had either been paid for their discretion or had signed non-disclosure agreements. The world believed Adrian Blackwood was merely eccentric, preferring to run his empire from the shadows. Only his inner circle knew the truth, that beneath the carefully constructed myth of the reclusive genius lay a man too broken to face the world's judgment. And now this woman, this security expert with impeccable credentials and a voice that had somehow become his lifeline through countless virtual meetings, was fighting to reach him. The security feed showed Emma taking down two men in tactical gear with efficient, brutal movements. Former military, his background check had said. Special operations. Decorated before leaving under circumstances classified beyond even his considerable reach. Adrian watched her calculated violence with a mixture of awe and terror. Whoever Emma Chen truly was, she was far more dangerous than her resume suggested. But the question remained, was she fighting to protect him or to finish the job others had failed to complete? His scarred hand made the decision before his mind could fully process the implications, unlocking the emergency access to the service corridors. Whatever her intentions, Emma Chen was the first real mystery to enter his carefully controlled world in years. If she meant to kill him, at least he would die looking into the eyes of the woman whose voice had kept him tethered to humanity. The elevator doors finally parted, and Emma burst into the empty corridor, gun drawn. The memory stick burned against her skin, carrying secrets that had already cost 3 people their lives. The explosion at the gala had been meant to eliminate both her and the evidence, but years of combat instincts had saved her. Now those same instincts screamed danger as the corridor lights suddenly dimmed. Security protocol for an executive emergency. Either Adrian was initiating lockdown procedures, or someone had reached him first. Emma moved silently along the wall, counting doors until she reached the unmarked entrance to his private elevator. Her security clearance shouldn't grant her access to the uppermost floors, but she'd prepared for this contingency. The small device attached to her phone would bypass the standard security protocols, though it would immediately alert the system to her unauthorized entry. She would have minutes, at most, before the building's automatic defenses identified her as an intruder. The question that had haunted her for 3 months now pounded in her skull: would Adrian Blackwood listen to a woman he'd never met, bearing evidence of betrayal from within his inner circle? The same inner circle that had sheltered and protected him since the fire? Emma had watched him through the security feeds, studied him during virtual meetings when he thought his camera was off. She had seen the pain etched into his movements, the hesitation before each rare interaction, the gentle way he spoke to the few people allowed in his presence. Whatever the world believed about the monstrous recluse, she had seen glimpses of the man beneath the scars. A man worth saving, even if he no longer believed it himself. In the silence of her apartment, Emma carefully removed the bandage covering the left side of Adrian's face. The intimacy of the moment suspended between them like a fragile thread. His jaw tightened as the last piece came away, revealing the full extent of his disfigurement in the soft lamplight. He had fled the hospital with her after the second attempt on his life, his identity concealed, trusting her against every instinct. "Now you see," he said, his voice barely a whisper, eyes cast downward, "why I don't show my face." Emma's breath caught, not from revulsion as he expected, but from recognition. She gently turned his face toward hers, her finger tracing the edge where scarred tissue met smooth skin. "I see you, Adrian," she said simply. "I've always seen you." She took his hand and guided it to her lower back, where beneath her shirt lay her own map of burned scars, a secret she had never shared, until now. "Some scars," she whispered, "are easier to hide than others." Their escape from the hospital had been chaotic, a blur of emergency alarms and shouted orders. Adrian's security team had been compromised. The second assassination attempt inside what should have been the safest building in his empire made that painfully clear. Only Emma's quick thinking and military training had gotten them out, stealing scrubs and walking right past the men sent to kill them. Now, in the safety of her modest apartment in a neighborhood where billionaires would never venture, Adrian Blackwood looked strangely human in borrowed clothes, his scarred face exposed to another person by choice for the first time in a decade. "How did you get them?" he asked, his fingers hovering above the scars on her back, not quite touching. The warmth of his proximity sent electricity through her skin. "Afghanistan, my second tour," Emma replied, the memories washing over her. "Our convoy hit an IED. I pulled 3 men from the burning vehicle before the ammunition started cooking off." She didn't add that one of those men had later testified against her, ending her military career when she refused to cover up the civilian casualties from their commander's reckless order. Adrian's fingers finally made contact with her scarred skin, the touch so gentle it almost undid her. "You run toward danger," he observed, his voice tinged with wonder. "I've spent 10 years hiding from it." "We hide in different ways," Emma countered, turning to face him fully. "You built a fortress of wealth and isolation. I built one of constant motion, never staying anywhere long enough for the past to catch me." "Until now," Adrian said, the question implicit in his gaze. "Until you," Emma corrected, the admission costing her more than she expected. Their connection had begun as something purely professional, her determination to warn him of the conspiracy she'd uncovered, his reluctant trust in the evidence she presented. But in the 48 hours since fleeing the hospital, as they pieced together the fragments of the plot against him, something had shifted. Perhaps it was the shared experience of trauma, or the rarefied intimacy of being the only 2 people in the world who knew Adrian Blackwood was still alive. Whatever it was, it terrified and exhilarated them both. 3 weeks into their dangerous game of cat and mouse with the conspirators, Adrian stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his Swiss chalet, watching Emma skillfully navigate the snow-covered slopes below. For the first time in a decade, he had left his empire behind, trusting his new security team, handpicked by Emma, to manage the investigation. His board of directors believed he was dead, killed in the explosion that had destroyed 3 floors of Blackwood Tower. Only in this presumed death had he found a strange freedom. Emma had awakened something he thought had died in the fire with his family, hope. As she disappeared into a stand of trees, his satellite phone vibrated. The message from his private investigator contained only 4 words: "It was your brother." Adrian's grip tightened until the device cracked in his hand. His brother James, presumed dead in the same fire that had scarred Adrian, had somehow survived, and had spent a decade plotting his revenge. The betrayal cut deeper than any physical wound ever could. How could he tell Emma that the man hunting them was his own blood? The revelation crushed something in Adrian that had only just begun to heal. He sank into a chair, the broken satellite phone cutting into his palm. James, brilliant, charming, beloved James, the brother he had mourned for 10 years. The brother he had tried to save, fighting through flames to reach his room, only to be trapped when the ceiling collapsed. Adrian had spent a fortune developing skin grafts and burn treatments, driven by the guilt of surviving when his family hadn't. Every breakthrough in his medical division had been, in some way, an atonement for failing to save James. And all this time, James had been alive. Planning. Waiting. Adrian's memories of the fire suddenly shifted, details he had attributed to trauma and smoke inhalation now taking on sinister implications. The smell of accelerant he'd dismissed. The locked doors that shouldn't have been locked. James's empty bed, already cold when Adrian had finally reached his room. Outside, Emma carved her way down the mountain, unaware that their sanctuary had been shattered. Adrian watched her graceful movements, marveling at how quickly she had become essential to his existence. In 3 weeks, she had drawn him back into life with her stubborn courage, her refusal to treat him like a monster or an invalid, her unspoken understanding of what it meant to be marked by fire. The thought of James targeting her made his blood run cold. James, who had always taken what Adrian loved, deliberately, methodically, with that same charming smile. Adrian forced himself to his feet. He had to warn Emma, had to make contingency plans. But deeper than the tactical concerns lay a more devastating question: how would Emma look at him when she learned his own brother was the architect of their suffering? Would she see a family tainted by darkness, a genetic predisposition to betrayal? Would she finally look at him with the disgust he had feared for so long, not for his external scars, but for the poisoned blood that ran beneath them? Emma's hands trembled as she stared at the monitor. The facial recognition software had confirmed what she had suspected for weeks. The man orchestrating the attacks on Adrian was James Blackwood, the beloved younger brother Adrian had mourned for 10 years. The truth would devastate Adrian, especially now that they had grown so close. Their connection had deepened with every day spent in hiding, every shared meal, every night when nightmares drove them both from sleep and into conversation. She had fallen in love with him, not despite his scars but because of the strength they represented. Now she held evidence that would shatter him. The security system chimed, signaling Adrian's return from his morning walk. Emma quickly closed the laptop. She couldn't hide this from him, but she needed time to find the right words, to prepare him for a truth worse than any scar. The brother he had risked his life trying to save from the fire had actually been the one who said it. The evidence had been buried in financial records spanning a decade: shell companies, offshore accounts, surgical expenditures in private clinics across Eastern Europe. James Blackwood had not only survived but had used Adrian's money to reconstruct himself. The twisted irony wasn't lost on Emma. While Adrian had hidden away, ashamed of his scars, James had systematically erased his, assuming new identities as he infiltrated his brother's company. The recent board member whose hiring Adrian had approved without a personal meeting, trusting his CFO's recommendation, that was James, hiding behind surgical alterations and forged credentials. Emma heard Adrian's footsteps on the stairs, unnaturally heavy. He knew something. Her heart raced as she cleared the screen and turned to face the door. They had spent 3 weeks in this remote chalet, gradually moving from cautious allies to tentative lovers. Each night, they shared more of themselves, Adrian speaking of the crushing loneliness of his self-imposed exile, Emma confessing the disgrace that had forced her from military service. Each confidence had been a stitch, binding their wounded souls together. Now James's ghost threatened to tear those stitches apart. "He wanted what was mine," Adrian said, his voice hollow as he and Emma crouched behind the concrete barrier on the helipad. Below them, James's mercenaries were sweeping the building. "The company, the fortune, the life, he always did. But I never thought he'd kill our parents to get it." Emma's hand found his in the darkness, her grip fierce and grounding. "We have 3 minutes before they reach this floor," she whispered. "We can still escape." Adrian shook his head, the decision crystallizing in his mind. "No more running. This ends tonight." He pulled the small device from his pocket, the detonator that would destroy the evidence of his brother's crimes, but also the revolutionary medical treatment that could remove his scars permanently. Everything he had worked for in the decade since the fire. "Sometimes," he said, meeting Emma's gaze, "you have to lose everything to gain what matters." He pressed the button as the stairwell door burst open. The explosion ripped through the laboratory levels below, the controlled demolition precisely targeting the servers containing James's financial trail and the proprietary medical research that had become Adrian's life's work. The force of the blast knocked them both back against the helipad's edge. Through the smoke and confusion, Adrian saw the door to the stairwell hanging open, revealing a silhouette he would recognize anywhere, despite the surgical alterations. "Hello, brother," James said, stepping onto the helipad. His face was flawless, unmarked by fire or time, a face that had haunted Adrian's dreams for a decade. Always so dramatic. "You couldn't just die quietly in that gala explosion, could you?" Adrian pulled Emma behind him, shielding her with his body. "Why, James? Our parents. We're going to change the will," James cut him off, his perfect features twisting with contempt. "They found the discrepancies in my accounts, my little side projects. They were going to cut me off, leave everything to their precious firstborn." He gestured to his face with theatrical flair. "Do you have any idea what it cost to become this? To watch from the shadows while you, with your grotesque face and your pathetic isolation, controlled what should have been mine." Emma tensed behind Adrian, preparing to move. They had planned for this confrontation during the long nights in the chalet, but facing James in the flesh was more disorienting than either had anticipated. The resemblance between the brothers was striking despite Adrian's scars, the same tall frame, the same intensity in their eyes. "You had everyone fooled," Adrian said, shifting slightly to give Emma the angle she needed. "The grieving brother, building a medical empire to honor his family. When all along, you were just hiding behind that monster mask, waiting for your moment." James took another step forward, the gun in his hand steady. "That's the difference between us, Adrian. You let your scars define you. I refuse to let mine exist at all." The helicopter appeared over the edge of the building, right on schedule, the pilot who had saved Adrian that first night, now part of Emma's hand-picked team. The distraction was brief but sufficient. Emma moved with the swift precision of her military training, disarming James with a strike that sent his weapon skittering across the helipad. The brothers collided in a tangle of shared fury and decade-old betrayal, their fight more personal and vicious than any professional violence. Emma retrieved James's gun, but couldn't get a clear shot as the brothers grappled at the helipad's edge. For all his years of seclusion, Adrian fought with the desperate strength of a man with nothing left to lose. James, despite his perfect exterior, moved with calculated cruelty, each blow targeted at Adrian's most vulnerable places. "I should have made sure you died in that fire," James snarled, his fist connecting with Adrian's scarred cheek. Adrian absorbed the blow, using the momentum to drive his shoulder into his brother's midsection. "You were always impatient," he gasped, as they staggered dangerously close to the edge. "Always taking shortcuts." The helicopter hovered closer, its searchlight illuminating the brothers locked in their final confrontation. In the harsh light, James's surgical perfection seemed suddenly artificial, a hollow replica of the brother Adrian had loved. And Adrian's scars, for the first time, looked like what they truly were, badges of survival, of endurance through unbearable pain. "Enough." Emma's voice cut through the roar of the helicopter. She stood with the gun trained on James, her stance unwavering. "It's over, James. We've already transmitted the evidence to the authorities. Your accounts are frozen, your aliases flagged." James's perfect face contorted with rage. "You think I didn't plan for this? I've been planning for 10 years. There's always a contingency, always another identity, another fortune waiting." He lunged toward Emma, his movement blindingly fast. The shot echoed across the helipad. James staggered backward, surprise replacing rage as he looked down at the spreading crimson stain on his chest. He reached toward Adrian, whether in appeal or final attack, neither would ever know, before his momentum carried him over the edge of the building. The world believed both Blackwood brothers died in the explosion that night. The business empire fractured, stock prices plummeted, and the vultures descended. But in a small coastal town in New Zealand, a man with fading scars planted tomatoes in a garden while a woman with kind eyes read the financial news on their porch. "They're calling it the end of the Blackwood dynasty," Emma said, sipping her coffee. Adrian smiled, watching the sunrise reflect off the waves. "They have no idea what we salvaged from the wreckage." He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small velvet box. "I've spent a decade hiding behind my scars, convinced no one could see past them. You didn't just see past them, you helped me see past them too." He opened the box to reveal a simple diamond ring. "I don't have billions anymore, but I have something worth infinitely more, a second chance." Emma's eyes filled with tears as she took his hands, hands that had once commanded empires but now trembled with vulnerability. "The only fortune I've ever wanted," she whispered, "is a future where we both stop hiding." The coastal house was modest by billionaire standards but luxurious in its simplicity. Using accounts even James hadn't discovered, Adrian had secured their new life, comfortable but purposely limited. For a man who had once commanded an empire from isolation, the small-town routine had initially been terrifying. Shopping at local markets, greeting neighbors, standing in line at the post office with his scarred face uncovered, each ordinary act had required more courage than facing James on that helipad. Emma had been his anchor through the transition, her military precision softening into domestic partnership with surprising ease. Her nightmares of Afghanistan gradually faded, replaced by peaceful nights in Adrian's arms. His own demons retreated more slowly, the guilt over James's final fall sometimes waking him in cold sweats. On those nights, Emma would trace the increasingly faint lines of his scars, reminding him with her touch that he was more than his brother's shadow, more than the fire's survivor. They had salvaged one crucial element from Blackwood medical research, the regenerative skin treatment Adrian had developed. Not for vanity, but for healing. In the small medical clinic they established on the edge of town, they offered the treatment to burn victims and trauma survivors, funding the procedures anonymously for those who couldn't afford them. Adrian performed consultations from behind a screen at first, gradually building the confidence to face patients directly. Each person he helped heal was a step in his own recovery. Years later, a small medical clinic in their coastal town attracted attention for its groundbreaking treatments for burn victims. Anonymous donations funded surgeries for those who couldn't afford them. The clinic's website featured before and after photos and patient testimonials but never revealed its founders' identities. One video, featuring a young girl whose face had been reconstructed after a house fire, went viral. In it, she spoke directly to the camera, "Whoever you are, thank you for seeing past my scars. You've given me back my face, but more importantly, you've shown me that true healing comes from being seen for who you really are." The video ended with a simple message: if this story touched you, please share it. Someone out there needs to hear that their scars, visible or invisible, don't define them. Behind the camera, Adrian squeezed Emma's hand as comments and shares multiplied. Their greatest legacy wasn't the billions they'd once controlled or even the medical breakthroughs they now funded in secret. It was the simple truth they lived every day, that love sees beyond surfaces, and that sometimes the deepest scars hide the most resilient hearts. As they watched their message spread across the world, Emma rested her head on her husband's shoulder. "Think anyone would believe this is how billionaires really retire?" she whispered. Adrian smiled, the scars on his face now faded but still visible, badges of a journey rather than marks of shame. "Some stories," he said, "are too extraordinary not to share." And somewhere in the world, someone watching their video found the courage to stop hiding, to be seen, scars and all.